Funding for this edition of Remember Them with Steve Adubato and Jacqui Tricarico has been provided by PSEG Foundation, NJM Insurance Group, serving New Jersey's drivers, homeowners, and business owners for more than 100 years. RWJ Barnabas Health. Let's be healthy together. The New Jersey Education Association. Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey. Here when you need us most. The Northward Center. Seton Hall University, showing the world what great minds can do since 1856. And by the Russell Berry Foundation, making a difference. Promotional support provided by the New Jersey Business and Industry Association. And by bestofnj.com, all New Jersey in one place.
Hi, everyone. Steve Adubato with Jacqui Tricarico, our co-anchor and executive producer. Jacqui, we take a look at Vince Lombardi, who, listen, this is being taped a little bit after the Super Bowl. The Vince Lombardi Trophy, the Super Bowl trophy, that's the name of it. But in this interview, we hear from David Maraniss, who wrote this extraordinary book behind me, When Pride Still Mattered. Why is Lombardi, or how is Lombardi and New Jersey connected, please?
So Vince Lombardi was here in New Jersey. He actually taught at, it's called St. Cecilia's High School in Englewood. He taught there and was the football coach there for 8 years. Yep, 8 years there, where he really started his career in coaching the sport of football. So definitely New Jersey connection. And also he's a 2008 New Jersey Hall of Fame inductee. And not too long ago, the New Jersey Hall of Fame, part of something that they were doing around the state, renaming service areas on all the major highways, one of them got renamed to the Vince Lombardi service area.
And you know something else, Jacqui, and I talk about this in the interview with David Maraniss, who's a great writer. Check out David Maraniss's work on Bill Clinton. He's the quintessential Bill Clinton biographer. But in talking about Lombardi, what I was fascinated by, and I talked to David about this in the interview, is Lombardi's connection to Fordham University, that our family has a strong connection with the Jesuit community there, his connection to the Catholic Church. Jacqui wanted to become a priest, thought he would become a priest, became a coach. But a big theme in that interview is about Italian-American discrimination and how he could not get a job. He couldn't get, the only reason he wound up in Green Bay with the Green Bay Packers is because nobody else would hire him, and Green Bay was the worst team in football. Nobody wanted the job. He went out there, and the rest is history. He won the first 2 Super Bowls, 3 NFL championships before there was a Super Bowl back in the late 1960s. So listen, I'm fascinated. I'm obsessed by Lombardi, and I show this in the interview, but this is something I've had in this office for a long time. It's a quote from Lombardi, which he says the difference between a successful person and others is not a lack of strength or a lack of knowledge, but rather a lack of will. Obsessed by perfection and working hard, right?
Yeah. And he didn't just teach his players football. He taught them life lessons, and he was there for them a lot more than his own family, we learn from David. You know, he kind of always put his family last, but the team, his players, the other coaches really became his immediate family, and he devoted so much time to them. Vince Lombardi passed away in 1970 after a diagnosis with terminal cancer. It was in New York where the funeral took place.
St. Patrick's?
Yep, but then he, I watched a documentary about him, and his daughter talks about leaving New York and driving through New Jersey to his burial site, and people just lining the streets to give their respects to the great Vince Lombardi.
And I think he's buried in Middletown. Yes. That's where it is. 1970, died way too young. So we take a look at an important, iconic, we say that word a lot, but in this case, it couldn't be more true, the great Vince Lombardi. Check it out.
One of the most successful football coaches in history, Vince Lombardi began his career at St. Cecilia's High School in Englewood, where he spent 9 years. His success led him to the college ranks and eventually to the New York Giants, where he spent 4 years. In 1958, he became head coach for the Green Bay Packers, where he took a perennial loser and transformed it into the standard by which all other teams are measured. His philosophy and motivational skills still inspire people today, and he is legendary for his legacy of hard work, perseverance, and dedication. Elected into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1971, this New Jersey high school coach became the greatest head coach of all time.
We're now joined by David Maraniss, who is the author of a compelling book. You see it over my left shoulder. It is When Pride Still Mattered, A Life of Vince Lombardi. Good to see you, David.
You too, Steve. Great to be with you.
Great to be with you. Hey, listen, growing up as a kid in Newark, New Jersey, 60s, 70s, all about Lombardi, and it wasn't just because he was Italian-American, but that was a part of it. Why are we still talking about Vince Lombardi, and why is the Super Bowl just finished a few weeks ago? Why is the Super Bowl trophy named the Vince Lombardi Trophy? Loaded question, I know. Please.
Well, there are two different answers to that. It's called the Lombardi Trophy largely because he was so successful. You know, in 9 short years in Green Bay, he won 5 championships, and no one had done that before or really since in that period of time. And he came along right when pro football was becoming the national sport in the 1960s, when television and other things were making it the national sport. But why he's still so revered today really transcends sports. Lombardi became sort of the symbol of competition and success in American life and leadership. And that combination made him popular, not just in the realm of sports, but in business and life in general.
Along those lines, I'm in a library that we have in our home where we shoot the program. And I have this Lombardi quote here: "The difference between a successful person and others is not the lack of strength, not a lack of knowledge, but rather a lack of will." Lombardi and a commitment to excellence/perfection and the will to work that hard. Please talk about it. That's not just about football. That's about life, leadership, which I'm obsessed by, trying to understand it. What was going on with him in his pursuit of excellence and perfection?
Well, I think that it goes back to his days at Fordham, actually, and his training with the Jesuits, where will was a central part of their theology. And it was there that he developed the notion of freedom through discipline, which is an attribute of will, which is that you study the fundamentals and become so trained in those that you have the freedom to work from there. And that's the will that Lombardi had from the time, really well before he became famous. He developed that will, and that's what drove him.
You know, it's interesting to talk about Fordham. I have 2 sons that are, one graduated from Fordham, the other one there now. And you go to football games at Fordham. Lombardi played football there, but the Jesuits, the church, being Catholic, and you go to Lombardi, you go to the stadium and you see his number 40, retired, right up on the wall when you go see a football game there. Lombardi at Fordham, it was not a mistake he went from Brooklyn to the Bronx to play there at Fordham. Religion, the church, and Lombardi, please.
Yeah, it's all of a package. Lombardi, all of his philosophy in football stems from that Jesuit tradition, along with his time at Army, which we'll talk about later. But he learned that freedom through discipline at Fordham. He was a devout Catholic. He went to Mass every morning of his life. Sometimes later in life, he would wake up the priest to make sure that they could get him there on time to his Mass in Green Bay, in Washington, D.C. But that was just such a central part of his life that he was an integrated personality in that sense. Football was just part of that package, but that's where he showed his excellence and his will the most.
And when you read the book, you'll also, David's book, you'll see that Lombardi was a very small, undersized lineman. P.S. 7 blocks of granite. Who came up with that? Because this was 1936, if I'm not mistaken. Do you know who came up with it?
Yeah, it was Tim Cohane, who was the public relations guy for Fordham, and was deep into sort of that mythology of going back to the Four Horsemen of Notre Dame, because the coach, Crowley, was one of the Four Horsemen. So then Fordham had the 7 blocks of granite. It was then popularized by Grantland Rice, who also sort of popularized the Four Horsemen and others. There were poems written about the 7 blocks of granite.
What did it mean? You couldn't get past them. I'm sorry for interrupting, Dave. You couldn't get. They were blocks of granite. You couldn't break through them.
No, it was a wall of 7 linemen. The interesting thing is that Lombardi was, he was a little guy. He never weighed more than 175 pounds, probably. They had what they called watch charm guards. They wanted the guards to be mobile and smaller. The tackles were the big guys on that wall of granite. But when you get a name like that, it sort of lifts it into the realm of mythology. They were very good. A couple of their, Wojciechowski and Drews were became pros, were excellent. Lombardi had that will and had a lot of stamina, but he wasn't exactly the prototype of a modern lineman.
No, and he was not going to play pro ball. So now let's talk about coaching. What is not part of the Lombardi myth, but is real, is that he had a hard time getting a job. And he very caught up in the concept of discrimination against Italian Americans, believed that he was not getting coaching opportunities because, in part, he was Italian American. So he goes to St. Cecilia's High School in Englewood, New Jersey. Make that connection real, because was he there for 8 years?
He was at St. Cecilia for 8 years. He coached football. He coached basketball, even though he didn't know much about basketball.
He did not.
but he's a pretty good coach no matter what he was coaching. And he taught, Latin and chemistry and other difficult subjects. All, again, Steve, in that same realm where he had a capacity to simplify complicated matters. He taught chemistry in a way where he made sure that the slowest person in the class understood it, so everyone would understand it, the same way he taught football and did everything else. But yeah, he was there for 8 years before, he got a little bit of a break as an assistant coach at Fordham, then went to Army, but never really felt he was getting his chance wherever he went, and he felt somewhat discriminated against because he was an Italian American.
And also I'm sorry for interrupting, he also believed he would never get the head coaching job with the New York Football Giants. And he was an assistant coach there, if I'm not mistaken, David.
Oh, absolutely. After his years at Army, he went to the Giants. They had what you would have to call the greatest 2 assistant coaches in the history of professional football.
Was that Landry?
Landry was the defensive coordinator, and Lombardi was the offensive coordinator. They said that Jim Leal, the head coach, his responsibility was just making sure the footballs had enough air in them. And Lombardi and Landry basically ran the team. But even there, he wasn't getting a shot. He thought he could be the head coach at Air Force and other schools, but didn't get the chance. And then finally, he'd been to Green Bay, Wisconsin once before as an assistant coach for Army. He went out there on a scouting mission, and I found a letter he wrote back to one of his friends saying he can't imagine how anybody could live in this godforsaken place.
Hold on.
And it's that godforsaken place that made him what we know today.
A terrible team at the time that he goes there. What year was it, David, that he went to Green Bay?
He got there in 1959. The year before, they'd gone 1-10-1 under a hapless coach named Scooter McLean.
They were terrible. They were bordering on getting kicked out of the league. He goes in there. How does he begin to turn this? We're up against the break here. We'll come right back with David Maraniss in just a second. Then P.S. the book, When Pride Still Mattered. What does he begin to do to change the culture, everything about Green Bay, the Green Bay Packers?
Well, the first time he met with what would be his Hall of Fame quarterback, Bart Starr, Bart, after 1 hour of meeting with him, called his wife, Cherry, and said, "We're going to be winners." He just had this capacity to infuse belief into them, discipline. Scooter McLean, his predecessor, was completely undisciplined. Lombardi set up everything so that the players knew exactly what they were doing. He pounded the fundamentals into them. There's this famous scene where at the beginning of the year, he holds up a sphere and says, "Gentlemen, this is a football." But, he starts from there. And Max McGee, his wise guy, wide receiver, says, "Coach, could you slow down? You're going too fast for us." But
He was
that's
tough.
where he would start.
Was he a yeller? Was he a yeller, David?
Well, he was, Landry called him Mr. High-Low. Yes, he was. He was a laugher, a yeller, a crier. He showed his emotions on his sleeve. But one of the mistaken impressions of Lombardi is that he was just a tough guy. He wasn't. His father, Butcher, Harry Lombardi, had tattoos on his knuckles, all of his hands. And one hand was work and the other hand was play. And that's sort of the way Lombardi was, too. It was work and play. It was love and hate. It was always balanced. There's so many wannabe Lombardis out there who think that they can just be tough guys, and that's the answer. But that wasn't Vince Lombardi. He knew exactly how to handle his players.
And as a student of leadership, any of us who lead a team or try to lead a team, you learn a lot from Lombardi. And again, we're going to talk about the quote that he wished he had never said and clarified: winning isn't everything, it's the only thing. In our business, there is no second place. We'll talk about that with David Maraniss, who's the author of the book, When Pride Still Mattered, The Life of Vince Lombardi. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
To see more Remember Them programs, visit us online at steveadubato.org. If you would like to express an opinion, email us at info@caucusnj.org. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Steve Adubato, PhD. And follow us on X at Steve Adubato.
Great drive fuels the leaders of tomorrow and today. Great vision paves the way for a brighter future. Great ambition goes places, moving onward and upward. Great empathy finds strength in kindness and in each other, working together to create something bigger than they ever imagined. Great minds can change the world, and great minds start at Seton Hall.
Since 1903, PSEG has worked to keep our commitment to customers and communities, to keep your lights on and homes warm. We're there when challenges strike, like storms or economic uncertainty. We're preparing for tomorrow by working to replace aging infrastructure, provide carbon-free nuclear energy, and deliver energy-efficient options to customers. PSEG, powering progress.
I'm very grateful that I'm still here.
That's me and my donor when we went to celebrate our first anniversary.
With a new kidney, I have strength.
They gave me a new lease on life.
I'm still going everywhere and exploring new places.
Nobody thought I was going to be here. Nobody.
And I look forward to getting older with my wife. That's possible now.
We're transforming lives through innovative kidney treatments, living donor programs, and world-renowned care at 2 of New Jersey's premier hospitals.
They gave me my normal life back. It's a blessing.
RWJ Barnabas Health. Let's be healthy together.
We're back with David Maraniss, who's the author of When Pride Still Mattered, A Life of Vince Lombardi. Why did Lombardi regret the quote, winning isn't everything, it's the only thing in our business, there's no second place? Why did he regret that?
Well, it's important to understand that he was obsessed with winning, but it wasn't his primary goal. He was striving for excellence and that will to do the very best that you can do. So his players would always say that he was much tougher on them if they won but played sloppily than if they lost and gave their all. That was really his goal. I write a whole chapter in the book about that phrase, winning isn't everything, it's the only thing. He didn't coin it. It turns out it was first uttered by a 14-year-old actress in a John Wayne movie who was talking to a social worker played by Donna Reed. John Wayne was playing this sort of ne'er-do-well college football coach who was cheating and bringing in ringers to play on his team. And his tomboy daughter, after Donna Reed pointed this out to the daughter that it looked pretty shady out there, she said, well, don't you know, winning isn't everything, it's the only thing. And that's where it got into the public culture. Lombardi might have said it once or twice, but it wasn't his mantra and it wasn't what he believed. He was all about striving for excellence.
And it was more, again, a complicated person. His wife, talk about his relationship with his wife and the fact that his wife, who had problems with alcohol, said that football was her husband's mistress.
It's often the case that great leaders are better at dealing with strangers than they are with their own nuclear family. So Lombardi had a more difficult relationship with his wife and with his son and daughter than he did with the football players, Paul Hornung and Jim Taylor and Bart Starr, and not his family, because he was so committed and so obsessed with football and with the excellence there that he, to some degree, neglected his family and his son in particular. His wife struggled with alcoholism and with some other things, but his son, Vince Jr., could never live up to being Paul Hornung or Bart Starr. And so he always felt that he was, in second or third place behind the other sons who were Vince Lombardi's players. There's that contradiction in Lombardi. He believed in God, family, and the Green Bay Packers. The Packers probably came first, God second, and the family third.
I probably make too much of the Italian-American thing. You grow up in my home in Newark, New Jersey in the 60s and 70s, and there's pictures of Frank Sinatra, and you're talking about Lombardi, and it's a mythical thing about them. But did Lombardi have a chip on his shoulder for his entire life? And he died at a very young age, I should say. He died in 1970 in Middletown, buried in Middletown, New Jersey. How old was he?
57, which is hard to believe. I mean, you think of him as this old man,
he looked
right?
a lot older. Yeah.
He did. Yes.
But Dave, let me go back to this. Did Lombardi have a chip on his shoulder?
Yes.
About his perception, about those who did not perceive him to be what he saw himself being, in large part because of being an Italian-American from Brooklyn?
He carried that chip his whole life. He was 46 years old when he finally got his shot in Green Bay. He was about to give up coaching and go into banking. And he felt that several times he'd been passed over because of his background. Now, that served him in two different ways, Steve, in two positive ways. One, it drove him to be that great coach and prove everyone wrong. And second, it made him more sensitive to other people who are suffering because of various discrimination.
Including African Americans. I'm sorry for interrupting, David. There's so much in this book that we're not going to get to. Lombardi and race and his players, it matters, please.
Oh, absolutely. When he got to Green Bay, the only African American in town was the shoeshine man at the Northland Hotel. Lombardi immediately brought Ellen Tennell over with him from the Giants and paved the way for many African American players to follow. Willie Wood and Willie Davis and Dave Robinson and many others. And I'll never forget talking to Dave Robinson, who said that Lombardi had a more profound effect on him than anyone but his father. And Willie Wood said that Lombardi treated them the most fairly of any coach he ever had. When they went to play exhibition games in the South, Lombardi made sure that they stayed at military bases instead of hotels because he didn't want his black players to be separated from the rest of the team. He was very strong on that. One of the first things he did when he got to Green Bay was he went to, Green Bay is a city of taverns, right? On every street corner just about. And Lombardi went to many of them and said, if I hear you discriminating against any of my black players, you're off limits for the entire team. He was incredibly strong on race from beginning to end.
I'm sorry, David, one of his black players dating and or married a white woman?
Lionel Aldridge. It's hard to believe today, but in that era, not just in Green Bay, but in the league in general, it was frowned upon for black players to date or marry a white woman. Lionel Aldridge did. He went to Lombardi, and Lombardi said, not in that modern lingo, but basically, I've got your back. You do, love takes you where it takes you. Lombardi was strong on that. He was also shockingly, surprisingly strong on gender issues. He had a brother who was gay, and Lombardi several times later in his career made it clear to his staff and to his players that if he found any of them picking on a player who happened to be gay, and there were a few on both the Packers and especially the Redskins, they'd be in trouble with him. He defended
1960s.
Yep.
Lombardi leaves Green Bay. He's getting sick. He did not want to see doctors. Read it in the book. He had a whole thing about not wanting to see a doctor. He has cancer.
Yes.
Then goes to Washington to coach the Redskins a short period of time. Describe 1970. He passes, the reverence for him from so many of his players and others in the league, which had very little to do with football and everything to do with their relationship with him. I don't want to say too much. You got a minute left, please, David.
Yeah, well, he was, the funeral was at St. Patrick's Cathedral, New York. All of his former players were there, from the Packers' glory years to the Redskins, to the leaders of the NFL, to thousands of mourners in the streets as his body was taken out to Middletown where it was buried. He was beloved. He was not just that tough guy. He represented something stronger in American life. And his funeral, even today, all 1970 to 2024, Lombardi still lives where most former football coaches are forgotten.
Hey, David, thank you for helping us remember and appreciate the very complex and important life of Vince Lombardi. Yes, there are New Jersey connections at St. Cecilia's in Englewood and where he's buried in Middletown, but he was a gift to America and to the world, and not just in sports, but in life. Thank you, David. We appreciate you. Honor us by being with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Great to talk with you.
I'm Steve Adubato. This is an important program on Vince Lombardi, and that is David Maraniss. And by the way, check out his book on Bill Clinton. It's pretty good. See you next time.
Remember Them with Steve Adubato and Jacqui Tricarico is a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating 30 years in public broadcasting. Funding has been provided by PSEG Foundation, NJM Insurance Group, RWJ Barnabas Health. Let's be healthy together. The New Jersey Education Association, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, the Northward Center, Seton Hall University, and by the Russell Berry Foundation. Promotional support provided by the New Jersey Business and Industry Association and by bestofnj.com.
Great drive fuels the leaders of tomorrow and today. Great vision paves the way for a brighter future. Great ambition goes places, moving onward and upward. Great empathy finds strength in kindness and in each other, working together to create something bigger than they ever imagined. Great minds can change the world, and great minds start at Seton Hall.
Since 1903, PSEG has worked to keep our commitment to customers and communities, to keep your lights on and homes warm. We're there when challenges strike, like storms or economic uncertainty. We're preparing for tomorrow by working to replace aging infrastructure, provide carbon-free nuclear energy, and deliver energy-efficient options to customers. PSEG, powering progress.
I'm very grateful that I'm still here.
That's me and my donor when we went to celebrate our first anniversary.
With a new kidney, I have strength.
They gave me a new lease on life.
I'm still going everywhere and exploring new places.
Nobody thought I was going to be here. Nobody.
And I look forward to getting older with my wife. That's possible now.
We're transforming lives through innovative kidney treatments, living donor programs, and world-renowned care at 2 of New Jersey's premier hospitals.
They gave me my normal life back. It's a blessing.
RWJ Barnabas Health. Let's be healthy together.